Um, excuse me. On July 1st, 1863, elements of the Confederate Army, led by General Robert E. Lee, made their way towards a small town looking for shoes. The Army was running out of shoes, and a lot of the troops were either walking in boots that had huge holes in them, or that had so worn out they just discarded them. They were walking barefoot. And it's not easy to march for miles and miles and miles without shoes on, so I've been told. I mean, I would drive miles, but march, no. Those elements, it was just a small force, accidentally bumped into a small force of Union soldiers and began fighting. That was not uncommon. You've got to realize that during the Civil War, it was a fairly small area that several large armies were maneuvering around in. And these armies were scattered over miles. Cavalry and artillery and infantry and different infantries and more cavalry, and they were all maneuvering and shifting around, and so it happened quite a bit. Confederate unit would bump into a Union unit or vice versa, and they'd exchange fire. But it just so happened this summer, word had gone out that the Confederacy might be trying to invade the North. So when that Union unit bumped into the Confederates looking for shoes, they sent out a word that this might be it. I need reinforcements. So more Union troops showed up. Well, the Confederates, realizing they're about to be outnumbered, also asked for help, and reinforcements showed up. And maneuvering kept happening here and there, and a cavalry unit moved there that bumped into a infantry unit and began fighting. And before anybody knew what was happening on that July 1st afternoon, a major battle was underway. And every general I've read about on both sides who fought that battle have all wrote the same thing. They didn't want it. They didn't want that fight. Not there. This wasn't good ground for fighting. There was either too many hills that the other side could capture and put artillery on, or it was too much wood so cavalry couldn't charge easily. Nobody wanted to fight there. Nobody. And it built. And it built. And it built. Until by the end, July 3rd, 160,000 soldiers had fought in and around the town of Gettysburg. Population 2,400. Just imagine that. You live in a tiny, tiny little town, 2,400 people, and suddenly 160,000 men are fighting all around you. Hard to imagine. The only thing more ridiculous to imagine is the first battle of the Civil War, fought in Bull Run, was fought on a farm. After that first battle was over, and the Union lost it, by the way, the farm was so damaged that the owner sold it and moved. Years later, Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee looked around for a small town for the surrender. They chose Appomattox Courthouse out of all the tiny little towns to choose. And they chose one house to hold it in. It was that farmer's house. He had sold his farm and moved into a town. And afterwards, his home got looted because everybody wanted a souvenir of the surrender. That's why they say history is stranger than fiction. Because if you put that in a movie, people would walk out and go, that was so dumb. Really happened. And the Battle of Gettysburg happened. And it was a massive battle. It was a horrible battle. There was a, one area, I mean, several battle sites became famous. Little Round Top was a hill that they just fought and fought and fought over for several days. The wheat field literally was a wheat field in the beginning of July, was in full growth. 3 days later, when the battle was over, there was almost no wheat standing. So many bullets, so many cannons fired, so much charging back and forth. It was all gone. Trees throughout the woods were splintered. And not just from cannons, because those big cannonballs would just destroy a tree on their own. Some of them were splintered because so many musket balls hit them. It just shattered the trees. And nobody wanted it. When it was all done, approximately 7,500 men were dead. And once again, in a town of 2,400, 7,500 men were lying dead in the fields, and the homes, and the woods, and the hills, all around this tiny little town. And the people decided, well, we just better have one big mass grave and get these bodies buried. Because I would like to point out that this was 1863 and refrigeration wasn't invented yet. It was July. They had to do something to do it fast. But David Willis, an attorney, wealthy, said, we can't just do that. Union or Confederate, we can't do that. They should be buried honorably. And he went to Congress and asked for money. Congress gave some money, and he put up the rest himself. And they bought it, had it rated down, 17 acres. From the National Soldier Cemetery. I know years later, an historical drive went forward to buy up more land and donate it to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. I know this because we bought a 1 foot square section. Yeah. 1 foot square section of Gettysburg. Many years ago when we visited, my dad got out of the car, stepped in some grass and said, "That's my spot." And, you know, it was something to visit Gettysburg, even as a little one. There are still a few soldiers haunting the area, wandering around, signally, pairs, lines of them, marching. It was a brutal time in human history. And just a historical note, it was a changing point in world history. The Civil War was the first time when trench warfare, barbed wire, and repeating guns, from Gatling guns, were used. You know, up to that time, armies would meet in big fields and charge towards each other, dumb things like that.